The noose creaked as the man stepped off the chair, his body jerking in midair, but instead of silence or finality, the room echoed with laughter. Not a manic outburst. Not desperation. Just calm, calculated amusement. And then, just before life slipped from his eyes, he whispered hoarsely through gritted teeth. "It's not over." Detective Laura Mendez arrived at the house just after dawn. The air was unnaturally still, the kind of silence that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. The house stood at the edge of an overgrown forest, a pale gray structure swallowed halfway by vines and time. No neighbors within shouting distance, no passing cars in sight. Just a single mailbox rusting shut and a winding gravel road that led to a scene she'd never forget. Inside, the body of Daniel Keene swayed gently from a thick wooden beam in the ceiling. He was barefoot, his toes centimeters above the floor, his neck twisted slightly to the right. The expression frozen on his face wasn't the usual mask of pain or despair. It was amusement. His lips were curled upward as if he'd been mid-laugh when the rope snapped tight. Beneath him, the chair he had stood on was perfectly positioned, not kicked or toppled over violently, but simply nudged to the side, careful, intentional. Laura had seen plenty of suicides. She knew the signs. But something about this was wrong. The scene was too composed, too theatrical. She turned to the mirror directly in front of the body, an old, dust-smeared pane hanging above a dresser. In it she saw not just the reflection of Daniel's corpse, but something else. Written in jagged letters across the glass, in what appeared to be dried blood, were the words, "I'm still watching." The forensics team arrived minutes later. They tested the substance. It looked like blood but wasn't human. In fact, it didn't match any known biological sample on file. That wasn't just bizarre, it was impossible. She walked through the rest of the house, expecting to find pills, alcohol, or some trace of depression. But the place was spotless. No dishes in the sink. No signs of struggle. Everything was tidy. Almost ritualistic. And then she found the computer in his study. It was still on. The monitor displayed a single document titled, "The Last Story." Her curiosity wrestled with protocol, but she opened it. What she read made her breath catch. The story began exactly how the crime scene had played out, down to the exact time of death, the positioning of the body, even the mirror message. It wasn't a diary. It wasn't a note. It was a short horror story written in the third person, about a man who kills himself to deliver a message from the other side. The final lines chilled her. He laughed because he knew what came next. And as his neck broke, the whisper escaped his lips, "It's not over." Laura sat frozen for several minutes, heart hammering. She reread the passage again and again. No typos. No edits. As if the man had written it all in one sitting. She scrolled down. Beneath the ending, something new caught her eye, a second chapter. It was short. Just a few lines. It said, "She reads this now. She thinks it's fiction. In 2 days, the one she loves most will die, and she will blame herself. This is not a story. This is a blueprint." She slammed the laptop shut. Daniel Keene was a horror writer, that much was public knowledge. He had a modest following, mostly online. But his stories had always stood out, not just for their disturbing imagery, but for how accurately they mirrored real-life crimes. A fire in Michigan that claimed 6 lives. A woman found buried alive in Texas. A mass disappearance in Oregon. All of these had occurred after Daniel posted short stories that eerily reflected the events in detail. At the time, people had chalked it up to coincidence or inspired crime. But now it didn't feel like coincidence at all. Back at the precinct, Laura ordered a full background check. Daniel had no visitors in over a month. Phone records showed almost no calls, except one. A 30-second call made 11 minutes after the time of death, to a number with no ID. The audio recording, pulled from his voicemail archive, revealed only a faint whisper. "He did it. He's ready. We start now." No voice recognition match. No data from the receiving line. Just silence and static after the message. Laura stared at the report in disbelief. A man had hung himself, left a manuscript describing his own death in perfect detail, and somehow made a phone call after his final breath. And then there was the mirror message, "I'm still watching." Who was watching? And why her? Later that evening, she returned to her apartment, trying to piece things together. She sat down to review the manuscript again, which she had uploaded to her secure tablet. There was a new sentence at the bottom. "You're being followed." She hadn't typed that. No one else had access to the document. Her hands trembled slightly. She checked the metadata. The last edit was time-stamped while she'd been driving home. Impossible. Laura stood, looking out her apartment window. Across the street, a man stood under a flickering lamppost, unmoving. His face was obscured by the shadow of his hood. She blinked and he was gone. Back inside the house where Daniel had died, forensics found something else later. A second hidden document saved under an encrypted folder on his hard drive. It was titled, Victim 2, The Believer. Laura never told anyone. Not yet. Because she hadn't decided if she believed it. Or if she wanted to believe it. But something deep inside her whispered what she didn't want to hear. This death wasn't the end. It was just the opening chapter. Laura didn't sleep that night. Her thoughts kept circling back to the manuscript. The scenes were too vivid, the details too precise. It didn't read like a story, it read like surveillance. Like the writer had seen it all happen before it did. She had requested the laptop be brought to a secure forensic unit at the station, but she couldn't wait. She needed to understand it herself. She reopened the file on her tablet and started reading from the beginning, word for word. At first, it followed Daniel's final day. Every minute accounted for, making coffee, staring at his wall of news clippings, muttering to himself about needing more time. Then the tone shifted. It began to read more like a prophecy. He described a woman who would come looking for answers after his death. A woman with a hidden scar on her shoulder, a detail Laura had never made public, from a childhood accident. Then came the sentence that twisted her stomach into knots. She will think she is here to solve his death, but the death was written only to bring her closer to hers. Her fingers froze on the screen. It was as if the manuscript was reading her. She copied the file onto a secure drive and handed it over to the tech department for digital forensics. They confirmed something inexplicable. The file had been edited several times after Daniel's official time of death. The timestamps didn't lie. But no one could explain how. The computer had no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no outside access. It was as if the file was evolving on its own. When Laura returned to the manuscript later that evening, she found new pages waiting. 10 of them. These new chapters didn't follow Daniel. They followed her. Her routine, her thoughts, her silent doubts. It mentioned the exact song she had been humming in her car just an hour earlier. The brand of gum she had bought from a vending machine that morning. These weren't things someone could have guessed or dug up. These were things no one should know. And then came the part that left her cold. The next predicted event was dated the following evening. At 9:46 p.m., a body will be discovered behind a church, stabbed once, eyes open, mouth torn at the corners and a smile. She will recognize the victim. And it will break her. Laura slammed the tablet shut. She drove without thinking. Straight to the church mentioned in the manuscript. It was an old brick structure on the outskirts of the city, mostly abandoned except for Sunday mornings. She arrived at 8:30 p.m., pacing the grounds, flashlight in hand, praying she wouldn't find anything. At 9:45 her heart began to race. Her phone read 9:46. She rounded the rear of the building. That's when she saw him. A man lay sprawled in the dirt, face to the sky, expression twisted into an unnatural grin. One stab wound, exactly where the manuscript described. Blood still warm. His wallet identified him as Mark Reyes. Laura's heart cracked open. Mark had been her partner 2 years ago, her friend, her anchor during the most difficult cases. They had drifted apart after a disagreement, but she had always thought of him as the one person who truly understood her. And now he was dead. Just as predicted. The story hadn't just foreshadowed this, it had caused it. Or at least that's how it felt. Someone or something was pulling the strings and Laura was caught in the middle of it. Back at the precinct, she requested any and all data on Daniel's previous manuscripts. There were dozens of unpublished stories in his archive. Almost all were horror tales involving ritual deaths, disappearances, hauntings, each eerily aligned with a real incident from the past 3 years. Every one of them matched the detail and timeline of crimes across different states. But one thing stood out. A peculiar pattern. In each story, a central character, always unnamed, always described vaguely, intervened. Sometimes trying to stop the events, sometimes unintentionally accelerating them. In every case, the outcome was worse because of their involvement. Laura began to suspect that she wasn't the first reader of Daniel's work to get drawn in. But she might be the last. When she opened the manuscript again the next day, she found another edition. This one wasn't narrative. It was a direct message. You think you're the one investigating. But the moment you read this, you became the one being studied. Stop trying to solve it. The story doesn't want to be solved. It wants to be believed. Her hand trembled. She tried to shut the file. It wouldn't close. She forced a reboot. The document reopened by itself. Another line appeared as she stared in horror. "This is not your story, Laura. You're just the turning point." She pulled the power cable, yanked the battery. The screen stayed on for 3 full seconds before finally dying. She realized then that she was never meant to end Daniel's story. She was meant to continue it. Laura couldn't escape the feeling that everything around her was a set, a carefully constructed stage, and she was just walking the path already written. She had always trusted logic, timelines, hard evidence. But now cause and effect had fractured. The manuscript predicted a death. Then it happened. It spoke to her directly. And now it refused to be shut off. Every step forward felt less like investigation and more like being lured deeper into a trap. She stopped sleeping. Her mind replayed Mark Rhea's lifeless grin every time she closed her eyes. She went back to the beginning, revisiting Daniel Keene's house. She had to find something she missed. Something that would restore a sense of order. She combed the floorboards, shelves, even behind wall panels. In a hidden drawer beneath the study desk, she found an old mini-tape recorder labeled Endings. She pressed play. Static filled the first 10 seconds. Then a voice, not Daniel's. "Come." Measured. "Mel." She won't believe it at first. They never do. But when the story starts writing itself, belief doesn't matter. She's already a character now. Click. End of tape. She rewound it, listened again. The voice wasn't familiar, but something about it felt intentional, like it wasn't speaking about her, but to her. The last thing she found inside the drawer was a torn page from an old composition notebook. The handwriting matched Daniel's. Read. "The final page is not written yet. But it will be as soon as she makes her choice." Laura returned to the precinct and isolated herself in the cold case archive. She began laying out the pattern from Daniel's other stories. Not just the crimes, but the people involved. Victims, investigators, witnesses. Their names formed a tangled web, and at the center of it all, always one person, the reader. Each time someone read the manuscript, the story updated. And within days they'd either gone missing, gone mad, or died. The pattern was clear now. The manuscript wasn't just predicting events. It was causing them. Each new reader unknowingly accepted a role, like an actor stepping on stage without realizing the curtains had already risen. And Daniel? He had never been the author. Just the first reader. She returned home with one goal in mind, to destroy the manuscript. Not just delete it, but wipe every trace, every file, every backup. She booted her tablet, prepared to erase everything. But the moment it powered on, a new document appeared. It was titled, Final Act. She hesitated, then clicked. The document was short, no more than a paragraph. It described a woman standing alone in her apartment, about to destroy the manuscript. And then it described a knock at the door. 4 knocks. Followed by a voice. A chill ran down her spine. She read the next sentence aloud. Then came 4 slow knocks on the door. And the voice said, "Don't end it. Not yet." The knock came instantly. 4 times. Slow. Deliberate. Laura stared at the door. Frozen. Every instinct told her not to open it. She edged closer and whispered, "Who is it?" No answer. She looked through the peephole. No one. Nothing. Just the hallway. Empty. She backed away. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears. She turned to the screen and gasped. The manuscript had changed. There were now 2 paragraphs. The new one read. She looked through the peephole. She saw no one. But when she turned around, he was already inside. She spun. The apartment was still. Empty. But her gut told her something had changed. The lights seemed dimmer. The silence too deep. And then a voice. Behind her. Quiet, amused. "You finally get it now, don't you?" She turned. Standing at the edge of the living room was Daniel Keene. Alive. His neck bore the rope burn. His eyes glowed with something unnatural. But it was him. Breathing. Smiling. "You're not real," she whispered. "I'm more real than you are now," he said. "You thought a story ends when the character dies? No. A story ends when the reader stops believing it's a story. But you've given it life." Laura stepped back. "What do you want?" "To finish what we started. The manuscript isn't a curse. It's a door. And every person who reads it helps it open wider." Her mind reeled. "So who wrote it?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "Not who. What? It writes itself. It always has. Through people like us." She felt dizzy. The lights flickered. Her tablet screen glowed again. A new sentence appeared on the document. She asked the question that finally opened the door. And then her apartment ceiling cracked. Not physically. It sounded like a crack, reality splintering down the middle. Shadows leaked from the corners, long tendrils snaking across the walls. Daniel stepped forward. It's not over. It was never meant to be over. It was only waiting, for someone who believed in endings. Laura's body felt heavy, like the air had thickened. She reached for her service weapon, but it wasn't there. Nothing was. The room had gone gray, like it had been sketched in charcoal. Then the final line of the manuscript scrawled itself in real time on the tablet. And as she disappeared into the story, another reader opened the file. The screen went black. Somewhere, in a different room, in a different city, another curious reader clicked on a strange manuscript titled, The Last Story. And it began again.